Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Ask an Expert, all your CSS profile questions. Just a few details about participating today. The chat feature has been disabled, and how we're going to work this, if you have a question, you can put that in the Q&A, and then we'll be looking at the questions and asking a lot of those live. We'll also be sending out a recording of the webinar and the slides after a few days to you. Also, if you want to use the live transcript feature, that will give you closed captioning as well. So we're happy to have Mike Goodwin with us today. He's the Assistant Director of Student Financial Services at Williams College. He is our CSS profile expert for today. And I'm Sean Morrissey, Director of College Relations at MEFA. I'll be trying to moderate and ask questions to him. And we also have Jennifer Bento-Pinion behind the scenes, and she's going to help answer some questions as well. So just a little bit about MEFA. So MEFA is a state authority created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in 1982. It was actually created at the behest of colleges in Massachusetts. They petitioned the state legislature to create an entity in Massachusetts to provide low-cost loans to students in Massachusetts. Since then, we've expanded that our loan program is available nationwide, and we also help families plan, save, and pay for college. So beyond the college loans, we do have 529 savings plans, as well as the prepaid college plan. And we offer a lot of advice for families, such as this webinar that we're doing today. If you'd like to connect with MEFA and receive our emails, having signed up for this webinar, you should be in our email curriculum already, and that's going to give you information about upcoming webinars, financial aid tips. We send out scholarship lists, important deadlines and articles, and a lot of information about paying for college. We also have a lot of social media, and here are the different links to that. And again, we will be sending these slides to you, so you'll have all this information available. So let's get started with the CSS profile. Mike, can you tell us a little bit about what the CSS profile is and how it differs from the FAFSA?
Sure. Thank you for having me today, Sean. I appreciate it. This is probably the fifth year I think I've done this with MEFA. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. Just a little bit about myself. I work at Williams College. Those who aren't familiar with Williams, we're in Williamstown, Mass, which is the corner of Vermont and New York, so as far west as you can get. I met last night with a MEFA event with a family from Braintree, and they had no idea where I was, and it was kind of funny kind of explaining to them the location. Williams College is one of 250 colleges that uses the CSS profile, which is the other application that you would use to apply for financial aid, along with the FAFSA, which is a federal form out of the Department of Education. The FAFSA uses what's called federal methodology. They put together their algorithms and their design to determine how much aid a family should be receiving. CSS Profile uses institutional methodology. So the colleges that use the CSS Profile their aid is going to be coming from their endowments, their money that they're giving out. And so they want to look at your income with a closer dive than the FAFSA would ask for. It doesn't mean that they're looking for stuff that's going to give you less aid. And actually, it's converse to that. They're looking through their lens using the CSS Profile, how best they can help families and so on. CSS Profile is through College Board. Your students probably would have taken an SAT exam or one of these exams through College Board. They would have a College Board ID number. And so when you start the CSS Profile application, they're going to use their ID number to kind of get the ball rolling and connect their name and such to the application. The CSS Profile opens up October 1st every year. Oftentimes people ask what the deadline is, the CSS profile. Every institution is going to have its own deadline. So you want to pay attention to those deadlines, A, to make sure you get things done on time, but more importantly, B, some schools have a limited pool of aid that they can give out. So getting your application before the deadline is going to be helpful because you'll be higher up in that queue that they're looking at instead of being on the bottom or late with their application. The CSS profile is available to all domestic students and international students. And there again, every college has their way of using the profile, but ideally it's a similar algorithms and design that colleges can use fairly when giving out aid to different colleges and such. Some cases, a scholarship, for students applying for a scholarship, they might ask for the CSS profile, depending on the amount that they're giving out, because they're going to want a sense of what your income and assets look like. And that's the design of the CSS profile. It's right there in the name. The schools are looking for your economic profile, looking at your income and your assets to put together a profile of what a family can afford. As you go through the CSS profile, they're going to ask what we refer to as prior year. So if your student is applying for admission in the fall of 2026, we're looking at your 2024 income. So you can use that just like you would on the FAFSA to fill in that information. Your assets would be today's assets when you're filling out the form, the day you're filling out the form. We call that a window of time. And I'm sure we'll touch upon that a little more later. As we go through this presentation, please share the questions. Jennifer will bring them out because it's a good way to kind of tailor this presentation as we go forward and touch upon people's concerns and questions and kind of get more into the meat of the profile. What I like about the profile, using the profile, is that we're looking at your 2024 information. It'll ask you about your 2025 income, and there might be some questions about 2026. So again, we're giving that full profile, 3 years look at your family's economy and what you can afford. So that's helpful and makes it very different than the FAFSA. I could ramble on, but I think I'll stop. I don't know if Jennifer has anything that people are leaning towards or wondering about.
We do have a couple of questions around 529s.
Okay.
So yeah, so 529 accounts, if there are accounts that are held by the grandparents, how is that put into the CSS profile? Is it the total amount? Is it divided by 4? Yeah, that we can start
Okay.
there, I think. Yes.
So
Okay.
yep. And so what I'll do is I'll start a little bit before that, and then we'll address the investments piece. When you're filling out the CSS profile, I just did it yesterday. It's insanely easy. It takes you step by step by step. I'll ask you one question per screen. You answer it, you hit continue. I'll ask you the next question. There might be a screen that has 2 questions or 3 questions, but they're very, very simple walking through it. As you're filling out the profile, you're going to sit with your 2024 tax return, all the schedules of your tax return, and your W-2s. And it'll take you step by step, and I'll tell you what line number on your tax return where the answer is. And there's always a little question mark, a little box that you can press to get more insight of what they're actually looking for. It's kind of tedious because it is page after page after page of one question, but it's so simply used, and I do appreciate that design. You're going to go through your income information from 2024. You'll share all that. Then it's going to ask you about your assets, cash and savings in the bank, investments, home value, what you owe in your home, and so on. The form asks you to fill out the answers with what you have in your bank accounts that day, what you owe in your mortgage that day, what your investments are that day. When I work with families, I discuss the concept of window of time, meaning that night when you're filling it out, they are looking for those answers. How much is in your checking account that day? What I tell families is, look at it as you're filling this out the night before you get paid. So your checking account may have $10,000, but you have to pay your mortgage, your car payment, your car insurance, electricity bill. You got to get food in the refrigerator, all those things that come into normal life play. So the idea for me is think of those numbers the day you get paid. Make sure after the bills are paid, everything's done, what is in those accounts, because that's a fair asset assessment of what you have available for income and money. Same thing with investments. You know, and we know the market up and down and so on. We're all living this, including institutions you're applying to, because they're playing the market as well. That's going to be more of what you have that day that you're going to report. Your investments that you're reporting are what we call non-qualified investments, so not retirement. The CSS profile will ask you, how much do you have in your retirement savings? And you'll share that number, but we're not going to use that as an asset. That's your money for retirement. We're not going to touch. Non-qualified investments are stock market, Disney stock, other outside investments that are not retirement. 529 plans are considered investments. So you're going to report what you have in your 529, not just for your student, but your student sibling as well. So the full amount of 529 investments that you have, because the law states that you get the parents of a student can use the sibling's money to help pay for that other student, can take from that fund. So now the question that Jennifer posed is, well, what if it's a grandparent's 529 plan, which is a great question. One that has a funny answer, I think. Different schools may look at it differently. Some schools might say it's a resource for the student to pay for college. You need to count it. Other schools, like my own, will say that's the grandparents' investment. We're not asking about grandparents' income and assets. We're looking at the families, the parents' income and assets. So the rule of thumb is, if the 529 plan is in the student's name, but the grandparents are putting money into it, then you got to count that as a student asset, that 529, because it's in their name. If the 529 plan is in the parent's name to benefit the student, then you don't really have to report it because it's the grandparents' investment, and that's a good thing. For parents, you got to report it as your as part of your investment. We often share, plan on using that quickly, because if you can use that 529 up, a good chunk of it at least, that first year to help you with paying for college, that's less assets you're reporting the following year. Because the CSS profile for most colleges, you're going to reapply each year. And so now you can reduce that asset by 20, 30, 40, whatever the cost may be that you're using, the amount you're using, reducing that asset for the following year.
Mike, we
great.
have a question about if someone is a business owner, they're sole proprietor. What do they do with the reporting of assets for the business?
Yep. So the CSS profile will ask if your parent or parents own a business, and that information usually is reported on the Schedule E of your tax return. And so the business name will be listed and how much you've earned from that business. Schools are going to ask you, so let me back up for a second again. I should have touched about this earlier. When you complete the CSS profile application, you're going to submit it. And then within a day or so, you'll get an email from College Board asking you to upload your tax documents to what's called IDOC, Institutional Document Service. So you're going to upload to IDOC, which is part of the College Board, your 2024 tax return, W-2s, all your schedules, and your business tax returns, 1120S, 1065, 1120. Those of you who have businesses might be familiar with these forms. I will say that majority families that I work with run these very successful businesses, but they don't look at their tax returns. So they don't know what these forms might look like. So if you have a business and you have, you're reporting these businesses in your tax return, work with your accountant to make sure you have the right forms that you're uploading into the IDOC system. On the CSS profile, it'll ask you, what is the value of the business? And so that's something to work with your accountant. What is your business valued at? and then it'll ask you what you might owe on the business. And then what's in between is the business equity. And so schools will look at that as an asset. Your business tax forms, the 1120s, the 1065s, will show those numbers. And so schools may go in and look at that and double check that to make sure it's accurate what you're reporting. Along with that, these business tax forms, you're going to have what's called a K1. A K1, so if your business tax form, the 1120s, 1065 is your business's tax return, it's going to be separate from the New York tax return. You report it through the Schedule E. You're going to have what's called a K1, which is basically your business's W-2. It tells you how much you've earned from the business profits. And that gets reported on, again, the Schedule E. And I don't want to get too much into taxes and how they all work, but this is all information you're going to share with us on the profile and upload through the iDoc system. The reason you're uploading your tax returns and all this information through the iDoc, it allows us to verify the information you've shared on your application, because we want to make sure the numbers are right. There are going to be some items on your businesses that you can write off for tax liability reasons, things like depreciation, using a home as an office, that colleges may add back because you can write it off for tax liability, which is great, but we can't write it off for financial aid because it's still income you've earned. You're just writing it off for tax purposes. So again, if you have a tax business, and this morning, I'm emailing with the family back and forth, asking me about tax questions, your financial aid offices are always going to defer you back to your accountant to get a better understanding of your taxes, ask for the certain forms that we're looking for. And then if you need to make changes in future years, how you report things, that's something you want to do with either your accountant or your business finance advisors and such.
Here's a
Mike,
kind of a thing. Oh, go ahead, Sean.
another question about assets. So if the parent and student have joint accounts, should those assets be reported as a parent asset or as a student asset?
So that's a great question. So I think it's up to you. If the account is in both students' names, then you just decide how you want to report them. But here's what I'll share. For most schools using institutional methodology, we're looking at roughly 25% of a student's asset. So if a student reports they have $4,000 in their cash and savings account, $1,000 would be used towards their student contribution. Because when we get your award from the college, there's a parent contribution and a student contribution. So a student contribution is usually 50% of any income they have, like business income, they work a job, income from a job, and then 25% of their assets. Parents, we're only looking at 3 to 5% of your assets. So if you're sharing an account, report it onto the parents. If the student has an account and it's a significant amount of money, have a conversation with the student about moving the money over to the parent's account. And so when you report it, you're reducing that student contribution piece. A lot of colleges may not share that with you. My wife and I put 2 kids through college. I think parents need to know these are ways to kind of help yourself in that sense. The student contribution, a lot of colleges will just have like a $1,500 and $1,800 student contribution, even without any income or assets. But if they have a job and they have income, or if they have assets, it'll just add to that student contribution piece. So it's just good to kind of give some thought to, when you report it, where you want to report it.
Could you speak a little bit about legal guardianship, custody, where grandparents raising the grandchild?
Yeah.
On the FAFSA, they're considered independent, but how do they treated on the CSS profile?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, I just had a phone call today about this. So in the CSS profile, a student can put themselves as independent, report themselves as independent, and they would share. Now, we have a lot of students here at Williams who just put themselves as independent, thinking, oh, what a great idea. I'll just do that and it'll save me money. No, because you have to prove that you are truly independent. So a parent is deceased, another parent is not part of your life. You have you have a legal guardian, or your ward of the court. So the CSS profile will ask those questions. And then the institution will take that information and make a determination that we will treat the student as independent. And there may be just a student contribution part of that. They may or there may not be. It's all part of the colleges, but the College Board allows you to do that. If you're, and this is going to lead me to another question I'm sure it's out there. If your parents are divorced, or say you have a parent who's deceased, but the other parent isn't part of your life, there's a form once you submit the CSS profile, there are a list of forms available for you to give more information. And there's one called the non-custodial waiver form. This is an important form. Your colleges might even have it on their website. It allows the student to go in and share that one of their parents, or maybe both their parents, depending on the situation, but one of their parents is not a part of their life. And the form will ask for any information you have on the parent: email, home address, phone number. If they have it, share it. If they don't, you just put not applicable. And I'll ask about the second page asks what kind of relationship is there, when's the last time you might have seen that parent, and such. Then the third page asks for the student to give a short narrative about why they are choosing to waive their parent. It could be a case of abuse. It could be mental health issues. It could be a number of issues. And so this form is so useful for colleges to get an understanding of the context of the student's life, or the parent's life, the family's life, if they're living with one another parent. So you'll submit that non-custodial waiver form, but they'll also ask for three outside references who can support your request to waive this parent. And that usually that third party form, we ask you to be someone close to the family, but not necessarily a relative, clergy, work colleague, counselor, clinician, someone who has some insight into the life. And that will help colleges make a decision about waiving that parent. And again, if this student is independent, it could be for a lot of reasons they're trying to waive both parents. We would use this process to get that information. I feel like I went a little off the line there with that answer, but I hope it got there.
We had an interesting question come in, and I'm sure it's on a lot of folks' minds. But how is security and confidentiality managed? Information that's put in the form.
Sure. Yeah. So the CSS profile has been around for a number of years. They put a lot of securities and such in place when you share your information. So it's secure. They share the information with the colleges that the student lists out on the application. So when you're filling out the CSS profile, you will list the schools you want it shared with, and they will share that with the school. Sometimes students they change their mind and they want to put in an additional school. You can do that. It's unlimited. But the security measures in place are great. I was just at a conference this past week, 2-3 weeks ago down in Texas, with the folks from College Board and the CSS profile, and the security is there. The IDOC system where you upload your taxes is secure. It will go through the security measures through the College Board when you upload it to the IDOC, the Institutional Document Service. And then they will send it to the colleges that the student lists. So we'll get that information. If you're concerned about privacy, there's no concern. You are welcome to take a black Sharpie and cross out Social Security numbers on your tax return. We see that often. You certainly can do that. That Social Security number, at least the student Social Security number, will be part of the CSS profile application. But if you're concerned about information on your tax return, you can black it off. But I think the security measures are there, and they do a very good job of, in this age of internet hacks and whatever, I've not seen an issue with CSS Profile, and I've been doing this for 9 years. So I think I want to step back and talk when we talk about additional schools, because I think I kind of jumped over this. When a student is applying using the CSS Profile, it's a $25 application fee for the initial application, and that includes one school, then $16 for every additional school after that. So that's something to keep in mind. If your family makes less than $100,000 a year in income, then that fee is waived and there's no cost. If your student has done the SATs and the SATs were waived, the CSS Profile will be waived as well.
Mike, we have a question that some colleges aren't appearing on that they can select that college, even though they believe that that school does require the CSS Profile. How can they determine if the CSS Profile is required at the school?
Yeah, I think the simplest answer to that would be just go to the school's website and see what they request, what they need from you in terms of financial aid. It should be listed there that they need the CSS Profile and the FAFSA. The schools would be the place to look. I think sometimes we think a school, because they're a private institution, that they're automatically using the CSS Profile. But again, only 200, 250 colleges use the profile. A lot of schools still rely only on the FAFSA. So just go to the website and it should be listed there. And I believe if you go to CSS Profile, there might even be a list of eligible schools who use the profile there as well.
Also, there's a question that do schools only use the CSS Profile for need-based aid, or if a student is applying for merit-based aid, will they require the CSS Profile?
They still, depending on the school, if they don't want the profile, they'll still use it even with merit-based aid. Usually what happens is you fill the profile, that's looking at, again, your income, and then you will share additional information through the college, through the application process. That's going to ask questions about GPAs and class rankings and such that might put you in place for merit aid. The profile really is just like the FAFSA, is just looking at your family's economic situation and whether or not you'd be eligible for aid. Merit aid is usually based on other items. And a lot of those questions might be asked during the admissions process. And admission, you do the Common App, but schools may add questions regarding information that may make you eligible for merit aid and such.
We have one here around deadlines, and I feel like we hear this often. If a student is applying early action and they have, for example, an 11/1 deadline, do they have to submit their financial aid forms by that deadline?
That's, again, colleges have websites and every college will have its own policies regarding this. So I would go to the website, and if there's a deadline, there might be a deadline for admissions. Either call the school or dig deeper in the website on their financial aid page to see if there's a deadline for early action, early decision, excuse me. Either one, what their deadlines might be. Again, if you miss a deadline, you could be missing out on grant aid from the institution. So you want to make sure you're paying attention to those deadlines. If you're in a situation that the CSS Profile requires your 2024 tax return, but you've not filed your 2024 yet because maybe you own a business or you've need to amend, contact the college that you're looking at and ask what they would need from you, what their policies are around that, because they might give you a grace period to get those taxes completed. But every school is going to have its own deadline. There's no CSS Profile deadline. At some point, it'll cut off the current year. But I think probably the end of the calendar year. I think I still have students who haven't applied yet for this current year. So the profile is still available to them. But at some point, that's just going to get cut off. But every school is going to have their own deadline. So follow up with them. And that's same for the FAFSA as well.
There are a couple questions about how um, families can estimate the amount of aid they may receive before filling out the forms, and also how accurate the net price calculators are for schools.
These are my people. So one of my jobs here at Williams is I meet with families who are looking to apply early decision and help them estimate what their cost might look like. Because if you're doing, especially early decision, you apply one school, you get in, you got to go to that school. The only way you can get out of that agreement is if the cost is prohibitive and you can't afford it. Every college, this is a federal policy, every college has a net price calculator on their website, under their financial aid website. Ideally, it's supposed to be within 3 clicks from the main website to get to it, to find it. But that's the tool you want to use. And again, much like the CSS profile, you're going to want to sit with your 2024 tax return or whatever year it might be that you're applying for, but sit with your tax return and answer the questions on the net price calculator. I've met with, this summer I've almost had 80 people who use our net price calculator and wanted to meet with me. In past years, the numbers are about the same. I find that our estimates are $2,000, maybe $2,500, maybe off from the actual award, and usually in the parent's favor. So the tool is a great tool. Like anything that has to do with inputting information, there's this wonderful, phrase, garbage in, garbage out. So you want to make sure you're using the best numbers you can when you're using the net price calculator. And if you have questions, again, go to that college's financial aid office, make an appointment, and share with them that I've used your net price calculator. This is the number I'm getting. Can you verify this estimate with me? And they should be willing to help. The net price calculator is a great tool, but like anything else, it's limited. So if your family is a split family, parents are divorced, the CSS profile, and we haven't really talked about this, and maybe I'll touch upon it, but we can touch more about it later. Both households where the student lives and then the non-custodial parent, both of them would need to do separate net price calculators to see what their responsibility, what their contribution would look like. If your family owns a business, and again, today I'm working with a business family with 5 rental properties, 4 businesses, the rental properties tie into one of the businesses. And when you do that, there are many other tax return pages that come with it. The calculator is just not really designed for that. It really is designed for families with a W-2 earnings, maybe a little self-employment number, or a simple business. But it's a good tool. It's a good tool. I use it all the time. I look at other schools as well, and schools do a good job of keeping them up. And it's a great way, again, for families to get a sense of what this is going to cost me rather than walking in blind. Do we want to have we talked about split households yet? I don't think we did, right? And how that works?
No, that would be
So
helpful. Thanks.
I touched upon the non-custodial waiver form. But before we even get to that, if you're a family that's divorced, so the student has 2 parents, lives with one in the household, and then what we call the non-custodial parent lives in a separate household, both parents need to fill out the CSS profile separately. So the student will start the CSS profile. They'll put their information in, and it'll ask about parents, and they will choose that the parents are divorced or separated. The profile will ask for both parents' names and information and addresses. If, for this example, if the student lives with their mother, then it'll ask the form will continue when it's done with the student's information and start asking about the mother's information and start putting that in. At some point, the student's going to indicate that in this case, say the father is the non-custodial parent, and will include the father's email. College Board should reach out. They'll email that parent and say, we need you to do or your student needs you to complete the CSS profile. And then they'll start their account. My understanding is, and I was trying to find this before we met today, I was telling Sean, I believe this is how it works. The student's College Board ID number, which they're going to have from their SATs, They're gonna put that on their CSS profile application, and that ID number ties the two households together. That student ID number will tie the two households together. When each parent fills out their income information, asset information, the colleges will keep both separate. CSS Profile, College Board keeps everything separate. We don't share information between households. And I've had parents tell me it's okay to do that. We will not do that unless I have both parents on the screen who tell me that they're fine with that. The student will get an award from the college, and usually what it'll say is custodial parent contribution is so much, non-custodial contribution is so much, combined resources for parents would be the two added together. That's really the only thing you see of the other parent, is what they're responsible for. But everything is pretty much the same how parents fill it out. If a parent is remarried, so on the FAFSA, when you fill out the FAFSA form, they're just looking at the household the student lives in. The non-custodial parent does not take part in the process. The CSS profile is the opposite. Both the birth parents are responsible for paying for college. And we say you can divorce a spouse, but you can't divorce your child. So the idea is that we look at the custodial parents' income and assets, the non-custodial parents' income and assets. If either are remarried, you're still going to share that new spouse's information, W-2s. My guess is they're going to be combined on the tax return, and share the combined assets. And then the college, the financial aid office at the college you're applying to, will then carve out the non-custodial, the new parent, the step parent will carve their income out and split the assets for both sides. So the new step parent isn't responsible for paying for college. It's just the birth parents, the mother, the two parents. In some situations, we kind of alluded to this earlier, that parents are divorced, separated, or were never married, and the other parent just disappeared, then or has no part in their life, or may be dangerous to be part, to ask this information from that parent. That's where the non-custodial parent waiver form comes in, and you'll fill that out. But the philosophy of the CSS profile is that an unwillingness to pay does not waive a parent. And you'll see that in colleges can give you more detail about that. But just because your parents are divorced and your other parent doesn't want to pay for college, we still need that information. We're still going to look at that.
Mike, will the school take into consideration a family with multiple children in college at the same time?
So most colleges will take that into consideration. The CSS profile will ask the student information, ask the parent information, then it'll say, okay, say both parents are married and the student lives in the house with the parents, obviously. It'll say, we have 3 people in your household. Is there anybody else? And so then you'll add a sibling, maybe 2, 3, 4 siblings. And then you'll put their names in, their ages, where they're at in high school or even college. If they're in college, then CSS profile will look at this family has 2 undergraduate students in college. Most colleges will take that into consideration when they put together your award. In each college, for the most part, we kind of do the same thing. I would check with the colleges you're applying to ask them how they would treat that. But colleges will only recognize undergraduate siblings in undergraduate programs. If the student sibling is in graduate school, most schools aren't going to count that as having a student in college, because going to graduate school is a choice. Paying for a student's graduate school is also a choice. If you're applying for aid for your student to be an undergrad experience, we're going to give you credit if you have another student undergraduate experience. But each school is going to have their own way of looking at it. For the most part, schools are going to recognize that and give you that aid. Be prepared, going back to the net price calculator and look at these numbers, be prepared to know what that cost might look like when that sibling graduates, if they're older. And when that sibling graduates, and now your student has 1 or 2 years of them being the only one in school, make sure you know that, because that helps with that future planning and what that's going to look like.
We have a question about how someone should calculate the answer to the question, provide the best estimate of what the student's parents completing this application plan to pay for the student's educational expenses.
So I'll share inside scoop. Very few of us ever look at that answer, because we know A, it's just not fair, and B, we know students, a lot of families are going to put zero or $1,000. So I think answer that how you see fit. Some schools might look at that, especially if they're on the fence about something and don't know. But for the most part, and again, I was just at this conference and we kind of joked about this. A lot of schools are just not going to take that into consideration because we know you may not, have an adequate understanding of what schools are looking at when we put this all together. And why would you? If you've done the net price calculator and you've come up with a number, you might put that number in there, and that's fine. But I've never known a school to punish a family if they put too high of a number in there. Because again, the belief might be that schools, and you hear this all the time from people trying to sell services, the schools are trying to take advantage of you. And it's just the opposite. We're all here. We all get paid to do our jobs, to give the best aid we can to a family. But we know the number we come up with may not be the number you were hoping for. And that's where conversations come in, appeals come in, and get to know your office and understand your financial aid office, and kind of getting an understanding of how they've come to that number, and then sharing with them, yes, but let me give you context regarding an issue. What's unique about the CSS profile, which I really like about it, and I think I might have touched upon it, is that there's a section called special circumstances. And that allows you to give some context to us of what do you want us to know that's not reflective on your tax return or in your assets. It could be that you're supporting a student's grandparent and their housing, or their meals. It could be that grandparent lives in your house, but you don't claim it on your tax return. It could be you have outstanding medical bills for some illness or an accident that you're still paying, back taxes that you're still paying, giving us a sense of other things that we just aren't going to see just from your tax return and what you reported on assets. So special circumstances is a great tool. My advice is 5, 6, 7 sentences. If you're getting into paragraphs of information, then you can always just put special circumstances, put a note, see you later, and then upload the letter with your taxes that if you feel like you need to give more context to what your situation might be.
Mike, is there anywhere to put credit card debt or other debt and expenses on the CSS profile?
There isn't. Colleges don't look at debt as part of our analysis. We look at your home and what it's valued at and what you owe on it. We'll look at your business, what it's valued at, what you owe on it. But we don't look at debt. We don't take debts. And just basically the best answer I give is that some people can just run up credit cards and make poor decisions and then try to use that as a benefit for aid. And we just can't do that. Having said that, again, the special circumstances is a place to share with us that you are and you have great debt because of tax liens, back taxes. Your home was hit by a horrible storm, and there's things that we just can't do. We're underwater, excuse the pun, but underwater, trying to make things right. Schools will take those kinds of things into consideration, but credit card debts, car debt, those kinds of things, we're not necessarily going to take into consideration.
We had a couple questions around real estate and home value and how do we estimate home value and like a main home versus or rental property. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So on the form, you report your home value, what you own it, and what is valued at, what you own it. Some families might have it assessed. They might go to the town, see what's assessed at. You might go to Zillow. If we ever had a question, our office anyway, usually we're not going to question it. If we had a question, if someone said they owned a home in Manhattan that was valued $150,000, we're probably going to look up that on Zillow to see what that home might really be worth, because the family might have dropped a zero or two when they reported it. But I think for families, if you don't know, go to Zillow, and that, and you can argue, we can have a whole conversation about Zillow being higher or lower or whatever. But it's just an easy place to get an answer. If you have and colleges with the CSS profile might treat your home value, if your equity in your home is greater than your income, then they'll use a special treatment so you're not punished for having paid your mortgage for 10, 15, 20 years. And ask the school how they might treat that. Other real estate, summer home, rental property, you're going to report that, again, the value, what you owe on it, and that equity is going to be seen as an asset. So that's how that's treated. If these rental properties are all part of an LLC or a business, and that's your main source of income, make sure that your schools know that, and they may treat those properties as business properties as opposed to personal properties. If you have a summer home somewhere, make sure to include that. When you if you use a net price calculator, include it. I tell a story of a family who did the net price calculator, came out with a number they liked, applied for aid, and they weren't eligible, and they yelled at me, but they had a house on Cape Cod they never told me about. So I think, when you look at your assets, make sure you're double checking and you have the correct information. Housing, and Jen, you just got me thinking about something that goes with this. When you fill the CSS profile, you're going to share your home address and your zip code. And so what the CSS profile will do is, with all their algorithms and how it's designed, it will look at your zip code. And when we're doing the analysis, it will take in consideration where you live. We know the cost of living in San Francisco is going to be a lot more than it might be in I don't know, Williamstown, Massachusetts. And so these things are factored into the system to kind of recognize that. Now, people might say, yeah, no, it's not enough. We understand that. But the idea is that it is there. And if you have concerns about that, again, speak to your financial aid office and make sure that you're getting recognized for living in an area that the cost of living is much, much higher. People in San Francisco, the value of their homes are astronomical compared to the same home someplace else. We know that. And again, the zip code plays a role in that. And have a conversation with your financial aid offices and ask them how they're going to treat that and what it might mean for you.
Like, we have a couple of questions about families who, for whatever reason, didn't use the traditional types of retirement accounts when they do their savings. So it's showing it's just in a regular savings or investment account, not marked as a retirement account. How do they report that on the CSS profile?
Yeah. So, and this comes up often with families who might have 3 or 4 or 5 rental properties, apartment buildings, and they'll share with us, yeah, but I'm planning on selling those, and that's my retirement funding. We can't count it that way because we don't know what's going to come down the road. So we're still going to count that as an asset. If your savings account is, or outside non-qualified investments, or what you're relying on your retirement, we still have to count those because we only formalize retirement accounts of the things that we will not use. Anything else colleges are going to look at. Again, and I know I keep punting on this, but that's a conversation to have with your financial aid office. And I would say don't have it in a large group setting at an open house asking these questions. Make an appointment with a financial aid advisor at the school you're interested in and ask them how they might look at that. These are the kind of things that we see on appeal. And I will tell you, just share from my experience, if the family income is not necessarily high, but that asset value is, and they share that with us, then there are ways we may look at that to help a family preserve some of that for retirement, but still have to look at it fairly to all families we meet with, because it's all about being equitable to everybody, and recognize just to help. We're going to try to help, but we have to be fair to all families we work with. I'll share that's a common question that comes up, and every school is going to look at it. I'd even say maybe even advisor might look at it differently. So it's worth having that conversation.
This question came up a couple times, and I know we hear it too. What if the non-custodial parent refuses to provide financial information? What's suggested in that scenario?
Yeah, I'll speak from our standpoint. We will hold it out there until we get information from that parent. If the situation is there's a fearful situation that I cannot approach my non-custodial parent for this information. If there's a history of violence, if there's a history of mental illness, we'll waive that parent. We'll work with you in waiving that parent and such. If it's not there and the student celebrates every holiday with his parent and visits every weekend and has regular phone calls and have a great relationship, but they just do not want to contribute this information, a college is going to probably hold out on that, because again, you can unwillingness to pay or contribute is not a reason to waive a parent. So I think it's, have these conversations with those parents who are, not applying till next year. Start working on this information now and understanding now. Most situations, schools are going to hold out until we get that information. And if it isn't, then the schools will make the best decision they can, when they may just go out with no financial aid until we get the information we need. And I see this with all levels of income. I've seen successful surgeons who just do not want to pay for college, and it's that becomes an issue. And I've reached out to those parents and emailed them and say, we can't go forward until we get information from you. And most times I've had luck with parents coming through once the school reaches out to them. Anything else good out there?
So I know you already spoke about the special circumstance section on the CSS profile, but can you talk a little bit more about, if someone has a job loss, something like that, how they can use that section?
Sure. Yeah. And that's great, Sean. I appreciate that question. So remember, we're looking for 2024, right? Prior year. A lot can happen in 2025 and beginning of 2026 to families. We routinely, as we walk into the end of the year, we're going to see a lot of job losses, parents reporting them and such. So if you're filling out the profile now and you had lost your job earlier in 2025, again, that's the special circumstances section. You're going to share that with us. What most schools will do, and what we would do, is we're going to go out with an aid based on your 2024 income. What we do is we put a note on the award saying, let's touch base once you complete your 2025 tax return, maybe even share us your 2025 W-2s early on, and then we can look at an appeal. What we do at Williams, and the other schools are willing to do as well, is even though we're based on 2024, we're asking that for the CSS profile to start school in the fall of 2026. If your 2025 shows less income because of a job loss, reduction in bonuses, capital gains, maybe you had big capital gains on a sell of a house or investments that don't repeat in 2025, then many schools will look at your 2025 tax return once it's completed and either base your award on 2025 or at least come up with some kind of average between the two. So schools, again, we want your students here. We want to give the best aid that we can. So sharing that information with us, letting us know. I know in our case, if a family reaches out to me next week and says, I just lost my job yesterday, we're going to ask for a 3-month period of time to kind of see if the parent gets reemployed, if severances kick in and those kinds of things. So it might be a time period that we're going to ask you to wait, but more times than not, schools will want to see the 2025 to get the most accurate recent information we can.
We're almost out of time, but there have been a couple of questions about the timing of the CSS profile. Should they do that before they apply for admissions, after they apply for admissions? Does it matter? Can they do it in different sequences?
Yeah, I think, when your student fills out the Common App, it's one application and they're going to list the colleges they're interested in. So what I tell parents is make it a parallel process. They're doing the Common App, you do the CSS profile, and probably the FAFSA. But you're going to list those colleges as well. If say you list Williams College on your CSS profile, but your student doesn't, we're not going to look at it. It's just going to sit there and just in the ether until the student tells us they're interested in us, and then we'll look at it. So my advice is just include schools that your student is including on their Common App. Because also if you're paying an extra $16 per school, why waste that money? So make sure those lists match up.
Thanks, Mike. We're pretty much at time, but there are a few questions that are pretty specific that families are asking. Do you recommend that they call the financial aid office at the schools they're applying to ask them those questions to see the best way to report certain things?
Yeah, I do. I mean, and I say that because I field these calls all the time, and I probably today alone I've had 3 or 4 of them, of people just asking, how do I report this? How do I, the student's mother passed away and the father hand over the rights. This is what we're here for, especially the early decision time period. For a regular decision, if your student's applying to 10 to 15 colleges and you've got questions that are very specific, my advice is pinpoint the top 2 or 3. So you're not making all these phone calls. Because that's just, you're gonna be wasting your time calling all these other schools. For the most part, you're gonna find that we're pretty consistent in our treatment, though a few things might vary a bit. But I think, the go to the source, and the CSS profile is a process. It's an application with a function. It's not really going to be able to answer specific items that you're dealing with in your life. Again, that's the special circumstances that we keep talking about. That's not for CSS profile. That's for the school that's receiving your information. So I would recommend going to the schools and seeing what they can do, or maybe wait till you get your award and then go back with an appeal and say, you know what, I may have not reported this correctly, or how would you consider this if this was the change, whatever it might be.
Thanks, Mike. Jennifer, do you have any other questions before we finish?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of them, like you said, are pretty detailed. So to get in touch with the colleges directly. So no.
Okay, well, thank you, Mike. And again, we'll be sending out the recording and the slides to everyone within the next day or 2. So thank you for joining us, and thanks, Mike, for all your expertise. You had some great information that you shared with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you all. Good luck to everybody. Enjoy this journey. It's a lot of fun. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Jennifer.